Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So I want to share with you something that I learned from the school supply drive yesterday, which was a beautiful day. And this is the fourth time that we've done the school supply drive. And for all the prior times, what we would do is have people come in, get their school supplies, and on the side, we always had somebody who was standing there and saying, "Oh, if you'd like, well, you can do a church tour." And in years past, we've had anywhere between 300, 350 backpacks go out the door, and maybe 600 or so people file through the church. And I could probably count on one, maybe two hands, the number of tours we gave with the volume of people that came through the church. And I always kind of took it as like, okay, well, I guess they're just not as interested. And then this year, for the first time, what we did was, instead of allowing them to come and get the backpacks and then say, okay, if you'd like, you can come take a tour, we had them come through the back door, the main doors of the church, and come up here, and they had to do a tour before they went and got their school supply. And in all honesty, I was nervous on how it would be received. I was nervous on kind of the reactions of like, oh, you're just trying to push your church on us, and all these different thoughts that were in my mind. And to say, we had some mixed reviews, but by and large, the response was positive. The response was positive. And one of the ways that I saw the response being so positive is the number of people who came up to me, and probably different people, and said, I've been in this church for so many times, different events, and I had no idea like what you guys did upstairs, right? And it was really good to hear and understand your history. And to be honest, I thought you guys were Catholic, right? I didn't know you were Orthodox. And so it was a variety of different responses, but most of it was very positive responses. And we told them about the Orthodox course that is coming up, and a lot of people showed interest, and we'll see what comes of it. But I think one of the most powerful testaments to what the tours did was that I think it opened up people even more so to prayer, because we had a prayer team that was downstairs, and they were a very, very busy team yesterday during the school supply drive. The number of people who came up here, heard the tour, went down, got their bags, and then went over to the prayer team was heartwarming. And I was reflecting on kind of what happened and saying like, wow, a little bit of education, a little bit of empowerment, a little bit of knowledge, okay, goes much further than we realize, right? It was helping others open up to their relationship with God. It was making them think about their relationship with God. And so I'm going to tie it to the gospel of today, all right? And when we look at the gospel of today, all right, the transition isn't going to be smooth, but that's okay, all right? We look at the gospel of today, all right? We see that's a story that we commonly find in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the synoptic gospels. They all have this story of the vine dresser, right? And in the story, I want to summarize and make sure we're all on the same page. It's a story where the Lord is teaching, and he's teaching in the temples. And it's significant when he's teaching in the temples because we know that the Pharisees are there and large crowds are there, right? So this is a very, very public message. And so he's teaching in the temple, and he's saying there's a man who had a vineyard who leased it out to people. And they were supposed to till the land, and in the set time, he would come back and he would reap of the fruits. And when the harvest time came, he sent his servants. And the people, the wicked vine dressers who were tilling the land, saw the servant coming and said, "Oh, look at this one. All right, look at this one. He's coming to reap of the harvest. We're not going to give him the harvest. We're going to beat him away." And the way Luke says it says, now at vintage time, he sent a servant to the vine dressers that they might give him some of the fruits of the vineyard. But the vine dressers beat him and sent him away empty-handed. Right? This was the response. And there were 3 servants that the master sent in order to get some of the fruit. And then when the response was the same, and the response escalated because their treatment of the servants got worse, the master said, okay, well, what else can I do? All right, what else can I do? Send another servant? Am I going to be surprised that they, beat him and throw him out? It doesn't make sense to send another servant. Let me send my son. And surely they will respect him, because in those days, by sending your son, you're essentially sending yourself. Because the son was going to be the owner of the vineyard. He was going to inherit it. So he sent his son. And what did they do to the son? But when the vine dressers saw him, they reasoned among themselves, saying, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him, that the inheritance may be ours. Right? So they thought, let's get rid of the son, and then eventually this will become ours. This was the thought process. And when we look at this, and we understand, well, okay, like who is the Lord speaking of in this parable? Who's who in the parable? We know that the master of the vineyard is God. Right? His heir is Jesus Christ. The vine dressers who he leased it out to were the Pharisees, the Jewish nation. Right? He leased out the vineyard. And he said, okay, I've given you what you need in order to produce fruit. So what is he referring to? He's referring to all the history in the Old Testament. He's like, I taught you. I gave you the law. Right? I gave you the temple. I showed you how to worship. I corrected you when you were worshiping wrong. I sent my prophets to tell you that you're doing it wrong because you're creating such injustices. Right? The way that you're treating the poor, the way that you are unlawfully executing judgment on other people. All of these social injustices are wrong. I sent you my prophets to teach you and to recorrect you and to redirect you. Right? These were the servants that the master was sending. Those were symbolic of the prophets who were sent to the children of Israel. So he gave them everything that they needed in order to produce good fruit. But the fruit wouldn't come. They couldn't love their brother. They couldn't care for their countrymen. And they treated them so poorly. And so finally, the master sent his son. And in the fullness of time, God the Father sent his son to come and to teach. And actually, the basis of this parable is actually found in the book of Isaiah chapter 5. You'll find a very, very similar parable, where at the time of Isaiah, the kingdoms were getting worse and worse. And so he calls Isaiah the prophet, and he says, look at this beautiful land that I've set up. I've given it everything it needs to grow, but despite giving it everything it needs, the water, the soil, the air, the tilling, everything, it still produces thorns. Still produces thorns. So, Isaiah, come. Right? This is where the foundation of this parable comes from, or the basis of it, has historical roots. Right? And so the Son comes, Christ comes, and the interaction between the Pharisees and Christ are always tense. There's always like confrontation between Christ and the Pharisees, because he's trying to teach them. And he's trying to say, if you had known my Father, you would have been able to recognize me. If you had known my Father, you would have treated others differently. You would have loved them. You wouldn't have treated them with such injustices. All right? But you couldn't. Right? You couldn't see because there's hardness in your heart. You couldn't see. And so, I'm going to take the vineyard and give it to anybody and everybody who will produce the fruit of my Father. All right? I'm going to take the vineyard, because as he's teaching this parable, he's saying, like, look, here's the parable. What would you do in this situation? He kind of poses the question to everybody. And everybody's like, of course you're going to take it away from the wicked vine dressers. Why waste your time? And the Pharisees figured it out, that it's like, whoa, he's talking about us. And what was their response in the gospel? Certainly not. Certainly not. You're not going to take this away from us. We built an empire here. It's the wrong empire, but we built it. right? But the Lord said, no, I'm going to give it to those who produce the fruit of the love of God, who produce the fruit of the Father. And who's he talking about? The Gentiles, right? He's talking about those who are different than the Jews. He was talking about anybody who would come and see God for who he is and begin to live and cultivate in the same way he lived. Who would go to the poor, to the marginalized, right? And begin to care and lift them up. And at the end of the gospel, all right, the Lord is talking to the Pharisees and he's saying, look, you've rejected the chief cornerstone. But the chief cornerstone stands. Doesn't matter if you reject it or not. It still will hold together the building. So he gives this picture of the chief cornerstone, right? Which the chief cornerstone is put at the corner of two walls that are coming together. And it endures all the stress of the two walls, but it also provides the way that the two walls can actually meet together. If you have no chief cornerstone at the bottom, you cannot connect two walls. No cornerstone, no connection. So who is the Lord bringing together in these two walls? Right? He had taught the Jews. He had given them what they needed, but they couldn't. The Pharisees, they couldn't produce. Doesn't mean all Jews couldn't produce, right? The fruit of the Father, but the Pharisees couldn't. But he had taught them. They were the chosen people. They were his people. But yet he's bringing on, so that's one wall. And then on the other wall, it's anybody who is coming seeking the Lord, and also producing the fruits of the Spirit, producing the same works that Christ produced when he walked on this earth. So we have these two walls coming together. And it's kind of a beautiful picture because in one, there was all this teaching and the pouring out and the experience and the relationship that existed between God and the Jews. But it wasn't just meant to be knowledge. It was meant to produce, to go out and to bring, and to unite with the Lord, and to serve, and to sacrifice for the other, and to lift up when those who are down, lift them up, right? To live with fairness and compassion. And that's what Christ did. When he came, what did he do? He brought the knowledge of the Father, because he was the expressed image of God. But how did he express it? In the care for everyone. He brought the two together. He said, you want to know the Father? It's important to know the Father. Because the Father is seeking those who will worship him in spirit and truth. There is truth to our faith. There is a true knowledge of God that comes through Christ. But the expression of that is in the love and in the care that we offer to others. To have one wall of, well, I just know who God is pointless. Nobody needs one wall. Okay? You can't build off of one wall, but you can build off two. And so we see this cornerstone coming, who is Christ, who is the image and the knowledge of the Father, but also he expressed the heart of the Father. And when I was reflecting on the school supply drive, I was reflecting on, wow, we just gave a little bit of teaching, just gave a little bit of information in a non-threatening, you have to do this way, nothing. It was just okay, we just want to share with you. But yet, through that and the service they received, it opened up hearts towards God. And it was a beautiful picture to see yesterday. And as a church, what this means for us is that, yes, we've been gifted our Orthodox faith, and it's a beautiful faith, right? But the expression of it really comes in the care and the love for others. That's what a church should be. That's what an apostolic church is when there is the knowledge, all right, and the truth that has been given to us through Christ and his disciples and their disciples and so on, all the way through the centuries to us. What we've been given is beautiful, but the expression of it, right, should be in the love and the care of those around us. And when the apostles went to different cities, they taught, but they loved and they cared. And when we look historically, how did the church grow? It grew because they cared. And when people were cared for, they were willing to listen. So you can't expect somebody to listen unless they're cared for. And so yesterday we saw all of that coming together. And it was a beautiful picture. And it's something that we need to continue to build on. But there's work for us to do as a church, but there's always work for us to do as individuals. And in our own lives, we have to say, like, okay, how do I take what I'm learning, all right, and express it to my neighbor? Because if I don't take what I'm learning in order to express it to my neighbor, I'm missing something. The cornerstone is missing. I'm just building a wall. But if I'm going to take what I'm learning and express it to my neighbor, it's the completion. Puts the picture together. And it means that we're seeing Christ as the cornerstone who had the fullness of God, but expressed it in a sacrificial love to everyone. So we have to think about how we do it as a church, and we always have to think about how we do it as individuals. All right? So in our minute of silence, I want us to think as an individual, say like, hey, how do I take what I'm learning, all right? Or what is something that the Lord taught me that he is also asking me to express to somebody else? What has the Lord taught me in order to express to somebody else? And glory be to God forever. Amen.